Earlier today, Lewiston Police detectives in the State Fire Marshal's office arrested a 12-year-old boy. He was taken into custody and charged with 3 counts of Class A arson as a result of the fires that occurred at Blake, Pine, and Bay Street on Monday afternoon. Over the last 2.5 days, there have been 10 investigators from the Lewiston Fire Department, the Lewiston Police Department, and the State Fire Marshal's office that have been working this case and conduct over 50 interviews, as well as sifting through possible evidence at the scene. I want to specifically thank those investigators that spent the last 2.5 days without much sleep working on this case, including the lead detectives in the case, Detective Bob Moore and fire investigator Chris Stanford. The fire, as you know, displaced approximately 75 residents and caused a loss in real estate and personal property of over $1 million, to include cleanup costs. We were extremely fortunate that no one was killed or injured, and we can thank the responding fire, police, and EMS officials that responded to the scene, as well as neighbors and citizens that helped out, that prevented any loss of life and injury. At this time, we'll take a few questions. Keep in mind, with a 12-year-old juvenile, we will not be releasing that person's name.
Is the boy live in the building?
Pardon?
Is the boy live in the building?
Say it again?
Is the boy live in the building?
No, we can't release that information.
No.
Anything else?
Find any motive?
We have spoken to the juvenile suspect about a motive, and we do have one. However, we're not going to be releasing that information at this time.
What about a way that the fire started or a cause?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we obviously got that information as well. It does appear that the fire started on the rear of the building, on one of the porches, and we do have some information regarding that. But unfortunately, because it involves a juvenile suspect, we're very limited as to what information that we can basically release to you folks, prior to any type of arraignment.
That's 105 Blake Street.
105 Blake Street was where the cause of the fire started. That's correct.
When will he be arraigned?
It should be arraigned probably by Monday. It could be sooner than that.
I assume the boy is local? If he's not, you won't say if he lives in the apartment?
Yeah, the boy's from the Lewiston Auburn area, that's safe to say. I would also want to point out the fact that one of the things that have gone out on social media, really quite frankly, before the firefighters had a chance to put out the fire, was that somehow it was related to some sort of meth lab or whatever. And normally we don't respond to those types of rumors, but because it seemed to be so prevalent in this case, I do want to make note of the fact that there's no evidence of that whatsoever. But I also point out there's been several code enforcement officers that have been at the scene in those buildings, specifically 105 Blake Street, in and out of that building several times in the last few weeks. One of those code enforcement officers is also a police officer who's a hazmat technician. So had he seen anything that involved that type of thing, that would have been addressed. So we knew fairly quickly on that was just a social media type of rumor, but unfortunately it did get reported in some of the press as a possibility. The investigators at the scene and right afterwards knew that was not the case right from the get-go.
Did
Yes,
the
ma'am.
fire
Did you have a
alarm-
question?
I'm just wondering if you can comment at all. There were city officials in the building a couple hours before the fire started. Was that at all connected to the cause of the fire?
No, it was not, but I can tell you that there were, as you were aware, code enforcement officers have been dealing with that building. And my understanding is there was a couple of code enforcement officers that were there earlier that day in the morning following up. I also want to point out the fact that in these types of situations, my information that I'm getting from the code enforcement folks and Gil Arson, the code enforcement director, in regards to this case, is that there's a lot of competing factions in regards to being able to remove people from properties, even when their properties are declared to be unsafe. And in one instance, I believe there's at least one resident within the building that got legal representation, and so there was a legal framework where attorneys were representing them on that behalf and trying not to have them removed from the building. So it's not as easy as sometimes people realize as far as being able to declare these buildings unsafe and then get that removal. There's a lot of steps that have to be put into place in that regard. And there's also, with those legal entities, there's a lot of competing interests that sometimes come about.
Did the fire alarms work inside?
That I am not sure about. Can you take this?
Sure. I mean, we don't have any information that they weren't working, but I can tell you that due to the exponential growth of the fire, we didn't receive any information that they weren't functional. So. And we didn't have any information prior to the incident that any of the smoke alarms weren't working. So.
Can you detail the manner of the arsons?
No, we cannot, not at this time.
What about, could you detail how you got to the boy?
Well, as I said earlier, the investigators in this case, as the journalists are out interviewing people to find out what they saw and what have you, we have investigators that are going through the crowd that are doing interviews at the same time. And so we did interviews and re-interviews of several people that were at the scene or that were nearby that might have saw something. And as a result of that, we have at least 50 that were interviews that were documented so far. My guess is it'll be closer to 75 by the time this is done. And as a result of this, sometimes the investigators go back and narrow that list down to folks that they want to re-interview, and that's the case in this particular instance. We did initial interviews and went back and did some re-interviews, and as a result of that, we gained enough information to develop probable cause to charge that 12-year-old.
Was this boy identified, questioned early on, or is this just today? I know you said arrested.
No, I think that this is either the second or third interview that we've had with this particular young gentleman.
Is there any evidence that he was put up to do it by someone else, maybe an adult?
Yeah, I can't comment to any of that. I'm not going to comment the motive, obviously.
And can you say whether he's acknowledged that he did it?
I can tell you that as a result of interviews that we've had today, that we have developed probable cause, so.
Where is he now? Where did they hold the boy?
What generally happens in these particular situations is he'll be turned over and he'll probably go to a juvenile youth facility.
Where is he now?
Most of the time it's Long Creek, which is in South Portland. That determination has not been made yet. The state juvenile probation folks will make that determination. But generally speaking, that's what happens, especially in a crime of this nature with 3 Class A crimes.
Right, where is he now?
I'm not going to say where he's at right now. He's in custody, I can tell you that.
Do you think the suspect had a malicious intent, or do you think this was an accident that just grew out of control?
I don't believe it's an accident.
Did he appear to have, did he understand the magnitude of this fire and the people who were affected? And did he have, was he upset about this? Can you just talk about his state today?
Yeah, I really don't want to get too much about what was said in the interview, other than the fact that, I'm sure like anything else, I'm sure he probably has some regrets. I can tell you, though, speaking with the tenants and the residents of the nearby buildings, we ran an Operation Hotspot detail last night that was unaffiliated with these fires, but we had about 2 or 3 dozen extra officers out and about last night, and the overwhelming thing that people were talking about last night was the fire and the unease that they felt as a result of that fire and how their kids were feeling. So it was something that we were, obviously we've been working on this day and night with all the agencies involved to get that resolved so people can sleep a little better tonight.
Is this boy known to police?
I'm not going to get into that.
Do you expect additional arrests?
We do not expect additional arrests at this time.
A question for investigators, please. I was curious, did you guys ever get in there and poke around, and were you able to kind of get to that area, or was this simply related to somebody saw probably the boy and nothing to do with the, I guess, evidence? We thought the evidence would be kind of all destroyed or whatever.
What I can say about the fire investigation is everything we developed at the fire scene has been pretty much corroborated by all the interviews we've done, and everything matches up to what we thought had happened. Like the chief said, we're not going to get into exactly how the fire started, but it was an intentional human element, arson, and what we have now matches up to what we found at the scene.
So were you able to kind of, like I said, poke in and say it was a porch and the second floor or whatever it was?
Yeah, we were able to match up what we have now to what we found at the scene. Our investigators, again, used heavy equipment the next day to look at things, and we feel strongly that we have found enough at the scene to match up what we have after doing all these interviews.
Any more questions? I'll take 2 more. Yes, Chris.
Could he be tried as an adult?
It's too early in that process, and that'll be a determination, that a judge will have to make.
But a 12-year-old in Maine can be tried as an adult?
I would tend to think he probably won't be tried as an adult, but I don't want to say for sure. I'll let the legal system speak for that later on. One more?
Where does all the debris go from the scene?
Where will the debris go?
Yeah.
That hasn't been determined yet. They'll have to, we'll have to make some determination on that. We'll work with the insurance companies as far as that goes. Thanks all for coming, appreciate it, and have a good day.